Today, there are an estimated 28.6 million Americans who are children of alcoholics. Nearly 11 million of those are younger than 20. Many of these children and young people are exposed to chaotic family environments that offer little stability or emotional support. As a result, many will develop serious behavioral and emotional problems that may impair their ability to live happy, normal lives. Hello, I'm Yvette Torres, Director of the Office of Communications and External Liaison at the Federal Center for Substance Abuse Treatment. I am pleased to be joined by an expert panel to dialogue about effective, culturally appropriate approaches that can be tapped to help the children of alcohol and drug-addicted parents. Among the topics to be discussed today, we'll be looking at what can be done within and outside the family to address child, adolescent, and young adult emotional or behavioral challenges. We will also attempt to identify ways in which family members can pull together to help and provide some insights into the organizations and entities that are available to address the problems faced by those living with alcohol or drug-addicted parents. Today we are joined by an impressive panel of guests who will help us better understand both the issues and the solutions. Sis Wenger is the Executive Director of the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. Dr. Donna Mogan is a consulting psychologist with Eagle Wing Enterprises Incorporated. Don Coyes is president of White Bison Incorporated, an organization promoting wellness and sobriety among American Indian communities. And Steve Hornberger is the director of the Behavioral Health Services at the Child Welfare League of America. Welcome.
It's important for us to recognize that children who are growing up in households where parents are actively using illegal drugs or excessively using alcohol, is that those children may be neglected and or abused. As a society, we need to recognize that those children, if we don't intervene, will bear long-term scars from those situations and cause problems not just for themselves but for others. There should be programs and information available for those children in the multiple contexts in which they function. That's school, that's church or Sunday school or a synagogue or mosque, so that it is the children recognize that it is not they who caused the problem. They have to live with the problem if that's necessary, but they didn't cause the problem. So that these children grow up with sufficient psychological strength that they don't have to repeat their parents' problems.
We're going to be talking about the problems faced by children of alcohol and drug-addicted parents, protecting our future. First, what we'd like to do is to really take a look at what the scope of the problem is. Sis, what problems have you seen in children that live with alcohol-addicted parents?
Children who live in families with an addicted parent experience a broad range of problems, and it depends how long the addiction's been there, how many people in the family are addicted, whether or not it's multi-generational. But generally speaking, those children live in an atmosphere of isolation, at least emotional isolation, an atmosphere that's unpredictable, irrational, that often is blaming and shaming. And when we look at developmentally what those things do to a child, that can profoundly affect the trajectory of their lives. The other issue is numbers. I don't think we recognize how pervasive this problem is in our society. But the research is fairly clear that 1 out of every 4 children live in a family with alcohol abuse or the disease of alcoholism, and then countless others live in families where the parents are addicted to drugs. And so it pervades all of our society, and it affects these children profoundly. The confusion, the lack of support, the sense of being alone. They don't know that they have a lot of friends and classmates with the same problem.
Very good. Steve, within the child protective system, there are even greater complications. Can you speak to us a little bit about those issues?
The problem is that substance abuse, alcohol and other drug, is one of the two leading reasons for children getting into the system at all. That and poverty are the two big reasons. But the estimates range from 40 to 80% of all the children within the foster care child welfare system have one of the parents has a problem with one of the substance abuses. I think the problem gets compounded when we're working with the children in the child welfare system, because these are the children that are most at risk of what Sis was talking about in terms of trajectory of problems throughout life, and these are the ones that the government is most involved with. However, there are not enough resources, and even when we can identify a family member as having a substance abuse problem, less than 30% of them can actually get into treatment, because it's a real question of access and capacity.
Okay. Don, as we look at the general population, as we look at protective services, we know for a fact that within the communities of color that many of us live in, there are particular problems and specific issues that we must deal with. In dealing with this challenge within Indian country, what can you tell us about the scope of the problem that you're facing there?
Well, it's kind of a complex problem in that there are the total population of 2.5 million, and there's 557 different tribes or different cultures or nations that have sovereign status. About half of the native populations will live on a reservation, about half in the cities. And actually, I would guess about half the population of the native entire community are under 20. So we have a lot of children that are in there. And the alcoholism issues in Native communities, they've been there for years. And usually a statistic that you can, like crime statistics, where you'll see them going down, trends on nationally in Native communities, they're going up. And so it's actually getting a little bit worse. So more resources and attention is needed to focus on that.
Dr. Morgan, we've all heard of Al-Anon as an entity that does help families that have addiction issues and alcohol issues. Can you tell us what type of presenting issues are apparent in families that come to seek those services or support from Al-Anon?
Well, very often the people that I work with are ranging in age from 20 to 40. That's the population that I deal with. And there is an aspect of confidentiality that is very, very important, because a lot of the people I work with happen to be in the military as well as the clergy. And this causes a lot of problems for many of them to even accept the fact that there is not another way around the problem itself. And this is where a group like Al-Anon comes in, because the backbone of Al-Anon is confidentiality. And a group like this, it gives them an avenue to begin to seek ways of choosing behavior that is going to help them to more fully understand how they got into the kinds of situations and relationships that they have gotten into throughout their years, from the times when they were children in their families into the types of careers that they chose, and then dealing with issues of whether or not somebody scripted their lives for them, or they felt that they were having their lives scripted for them. So Al-Anon is a place for people to put it all out on the table and then see if it flies in reality. And it's a way, when you have peers in the group, other people that are in Al-Anon dealing with the same situations, or other people that perhaps came from the same type of background, to stop and say, I hear exactly what you're saying. I used to say it myself, but it's no longer valid if you want to move towards wellness.
Staying along that vein, you spoke about the families coming in and their age bracket and so on. And I know that you're a personal counselor as well, so you've seen families, and I'm sure that you've seen some children of those families. What type of profile can you give us of a child, of a typical child that comes in from a troubled family?
Well, there are different roles that children take on in families of drug addiction, and I could give you examples of three. You would have the achiever. This is the child that is going to is almost like a perfectionist and wants to get attention by excelling in school or academic work or in some way, or even professionally when they go into the business world. Then you also have the black sheep. This is the one that still gets attention, but has taken another avenue, and because they feel like the scapegoat in the family very often, and so everybody blames them for everything, and so why not just go ahead and prove them out? Then you also have the jokester. This is the class clown, and everybody loves this person too. And though they may not be high achievers, everybody likes them because they take on these different types of personae. Excuse me. And it's a way to cover up. It's a mask that children wear, and they will wear this mask right on into adulthood, and it will affect their professions and their relationships.
What can be done to bring about a balance within those roles that these children have opted to take as a result of the alcohol or drug addiction in their families? What can be done by family members, by other family members to help them?
Well, with other family members, it's difficult in one sense because if they haven't accepted the problem themselves, when one person decides that they're going to do something about it, they can become obstacles, and that's unfortunate. However, if you have other family members who are healthy, and this doesn't have to be immediate family members, this can be relatives. They see the situation and they can guide people into such groups as Al-Anon and Adult Children of Alcoholics and Alateen. And if they have just a sense of somebody there cheerleading them on, if you will, a support, trying to do it all by themselves is often a difficult task. It takes a lot of courage to do this.
Dawn, in Indian country, what can you tell us about any type of familiar support systems that might be available for that child?
Well, there's a certain aspect that's built into the culture. Because it's pretty much an extended family. It's not an isolated family, so it's very common to have grandpa or grandma or the aunties and uncles still play a role, in there. They also have some, cultural things that people tend to gather at and build support to around the sweat lodges or the powwows and the dancings. Those build sometimes in my mind, I think of them as like little positive gangs, a place to go to that it's like a clan system where they'll go to for that type of support when they need it, or to find that safe place. Because some of the problems they're deep.
I think the most difficult, perhaps, of the systems to deal with in terms of support is really the protective care. Wouldn't you say, Steve?
Yes, because those are the families that are struggling with the worst problems, either in their environment or in their own family households that our country knows. However, every child welfare system certainly has early intervention and prevention programs for families that the children are still remaining at home. And more you're seeing peer support and family support programs grow, because even when you get in treatment, you're addressing the problem there, but you still have lots of other life issues to address, and you need the support. We don't become positive, healthy adults by ourselves. We need the support of the people around us.
Very good. And since I know that your organization often deals with, I'm sure that you get many calls on this topic, and how do you deal with, we're dealing with issues with the family now. What type of advice do you give some families, and where do you send them?
The people who usually call us, of course, are not the addicted person. And so the advice that we give them is to talk to the children, to help the children to understand that it is crucial for them, the children, to break the no-talk rule that tends to create the defense mechanisms that Donna referenced, for example. We encourage them to have the children identify safe people who are always available to them. An auntie or a grandma might be there occasionally in many of our communities, but not all the time. We encourage those people to help the children process. Is there a school counselor? Is there a teacher you love? Is there your best friend's mother? To help the children figure out who is safe and who is available, and to help them to understand that it's not being mean or disloyal to their family to talk, but that it's a healthy thing to do, that their moms or dads may try to tell them not to speak about what's going on, but really their moms and dads are trapped by this illness which dictates their behavior, and that if they were not trapped, they would want the children to be safe and to be supported and to do healthy things. These children need to get messages from within the family that it's not their fault and they are not responsible for taking over their parents' jobs. They take on so much responsibility. The other thing I think is important for family members to understand is that many of these children are not so easy to identify in the roles. Most children of alcoholics and drug-addicted parents actually don't look any different than other children, whether they're in the family or outside of the family. And so we shouldn't wait to have them demonstrate something. We need to assume they're isolated, assume that they're in pain, and address it. The National Association for Children of Alcoholics is a national membership and affiliate group organization that is working to bring attention to the plight and the mechanisms for helping the millions of children who live in families that are impacted by the disease of addiction. Over the years, we've accomplished a number of things. We first focused a great deal on adult children of alcoholics, helped to create appropriate therapy for them, helped to get Al-Anon meetings going so that they would have support groups to help them work through the life problems that they were experiencing as adults that actually were rooted in some of the devastation that happened to them when they were young children. We have also been focusing over the years on young children of alcoholics, trying to develop materials for schools and for churches and other organizations that can help people who work with children identify, support, educate, and protect the young children of alcoholics so that we can prevent those lifelong problems. Any adult in our society who knows a child who is being impacted by addiction in the family can and must say something to that child, provide some solace, help that child to get to support groups or some kind of assistance so that the child can begin to understand that they are not alone, that it's not their fault, and that they deserve help and need to get it.
Beyond the experiences that the child, positive experiences that the child can have with supportive family members, what other outside influences can the child tap when experiencing addiction within the family? And Don, I think I want to start with you.
Yeah, in our communities, we're starting to see this consciousness change in wellness. That word is coming up. So we're starting to get wellness circles. We have medicinal 12-step programs for men and for women. And those are, as the adults start to get healthy, then you start to see they immediately turn to the children, and they start to look for the children, like Sis was saying. Because, and I think I liked what she said about we have to look for them because they're lost children. I mean, they're just invisible, just due to much of the trauma. And so our wellness circles seem to be a very positive way to start. And again, the circle creates that environment, where it's safe. So we're seeing that. We're seeing like cultural circles too. We're seeing the sweat lodges and sun dances, and there's like a turnaround of places to go that are bringing back the cultural component. Because it's like the elders tell us, they say the culture is prevention. If we do have that culture, then it was the original prevention program. And so many of our circles are coming back, to that. And we're starting to see, we have Daughters of Traditions, where we're taking the girls 8 to 12, and they're meeting every week and learning respect and culture and elders and all that appropriate behavior, which again is creating it's so important in Indian country to make it safe. You have to have a safe place to go, and our wellness circles, I think, are really starting to do that.
Do the young women that participate in the Daughters of Tradition, do they often bring up issues within their families of alcohol or other substances?
Yeah, they do. In fact, part of that training is that first it gives them a sense of belonging, then they'll get a sense of trust, and when they get that, then they'll start bringing up some of the other issues. But the circle, it actually starts to build that. I think what the human being is looking for it to be in trust, but you do bring up issues, and we have to have the resources even available to help them access to counselors or the therapy, and but they do come up every place we go.
And so while they're undergoing this particular journey, their parents are also hopefully in some type of intervention as well at the same time?
Yes. The cycle that we use is how and where it leads to this is the elders have given us this circle of healing, individual in the east, family in the south, community in the west, and nation in the north. So as the individuals heal, then the families heal better if there's somebody from the family is healing themselves, which I think is a good role of Al-Anon, and some of those have gotten that healing process started.
Speaking of Al-Anon, does that work parallel to?
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking circles of trust. That's really what Al-Anon, Alateen, and even adult children with alcoholics is all about, is providing a safe place. As a counselor and a therapist, that's what I do. When people come, they feel that here they can talk about anything and everything that they hadn't dared to anywhere else with anyone else in life. Remember, they're trying to follow another script that they had written for themselves to survive in the way they perceive the disease. And the key word here is trust. And you find so many people in life just don't have an avenue for trust. And that's the beauty of these groups. And just as you were talking about them, Don, the wellness circles is really a good term for what we're trying to do.
Sis, outside of these two entities, if someone doesn't have access to a wellness circle or to the Al-Anon, what other outside influences beyond the family do you think they can access? And I know you mentioned a little bit before about the school systems and some other entities. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Let me briefly mention about what they can do at school, and then talk about individuals outside the family. School systems have the opportunity to provide educational support groups, which is, again, is another kind of a circle concept. What those groups do is give the children information to help them put some context to what their life is, to help them understand, to validate what their feelings are, to validate that they are not alone and that there are lots of kids like them, help them to understand that there are ways that they can learn to take care of themselves. And so Alateen does that in the community and is a terrific 12-step program for the children. In the school system, the support groups do that. In the classroom in the school system, a teacher can incorporate in a variety of health classes just simple comments. But in many families, 1 in 4 children, they just drop the information. And in this school, Mrs. Jones, the counselor, helps children like that. Or in this school, so that it's an atmosphere of creating permission to talk needs to happen within the family, within the schools, and within other parts of the community. I think one of the greatest gifts that children can get is some significant adult who will say to them, I see what is going on in your family, and I know that it is painful. I wonder, do you understand that this is an illness and that it's not your fault? You know, Don talked about the circles, and Donna talked about Al-Anon, and I'm sitting here thinking they're talking about finding a place of trust. Well, really, when you think about this subject, you go back to what Claudia Black told us over 20 years ago, that the rules that govern these families are don't talk. We talked about that already. Don't trust anybody. You learn not to trust, because when you do, you get into trouble. So you learn to trust only yourself, and in the process you also learn that to survive you stuff your feelings. So what we're talking about are a variety of mechanisms to break those rules, and I guess my first advice to the neighbor or to the parent of the best friend or to the teacher or to the clergy is know the rules and break the rules. And break them as often as possible, generally speaking and individually, so that these children can feel safe enough to surface. They get permission then for themselves to break the rules. Very healing for kids. It's not difficult, and you don't need a degree to do it.
I'm almost pained a little bit to hear about all the options that families have that have access to some of these entities. Many of the families that you work with certainly don't have access or don't know about the options that are available. And what is currently going on to deal with these children within those systems that you work with?
Well, I think you've seen a lot more of what we call front door work, where people are trying to connect them into the resources that are available in the community. And I'm not talking about systems community, but resources, but more informal. The neighbor. I mean, in urban neighborhoods, every block has what I call the mayor. You know, the one person that knows everybody's business. Well, that's someone, if you're trying to reach out to these invisible children, that you need to reach to them. But I think the issue I would add, in addition to what's being said, is that it needs the caring relationship needs to be there as the basis. Otherwise, the kid just pulls back in from when you're trying to do a helpful intervention. All the cultures have stories about how to address problems and move on. I once heard, when I did some work with an indigenous group outside the country, said that there are 3 ways to grow. One is to listen to the old stories that tell the people how to survive. The second is to listen to the elders, because these are the old people that have lived and they have something to share with you. And then the last is look at nature and see what it tells you. So I think kids need an opportunity to think, reflect, and decide. Now, I hear what's happening to my parents. I can see what it's doing to me and my family. And there are other people that care for me, because in every community there are always other adults that care. And I think it's a question of what's culturally specific to that child, that family, what's available there. The school is obviously the best place, because everybody goes to school, at least in the early years. I mean, as we get into teens, some kids unfortunately don't feel welcomed and then drop out. But for me, the critical fact here is it's like Maslow's hierarchy. You know, after we get past safety and trust, the next issue is belonging. And how are we building in our communities a place where kids feel like they belong, they have value, so that they want to try and do something different.
Yet the reality is that our schools are absolutely stretched to the max in terms of the curriculum that they can add on, that the teachers can add on. You mentioned that, you know, oftentimes you encourage, you know, we need to encourage teachers to mention this in the curriculum and just to drop, you know, a mention. And what can people do? And I'm really, because I think many of you have touched on the school systems and the learning process. But what can you know, someone who's watching this webcast and this program do in terms of encouraging more curriculum to be included in the systems to address some of the needs of these kids? What should people be thinking about doing if they know that there's a problem and they know that the problem is reaching many people in that community? What can they do?
To tell you the truth, I would go more for establishing or strengthening student assistance programs as opposed to curriculum, because the student assistance programs create this atmosphere of trust that gives permission to address the issues, that helps the children to understand that they're not alone, and to put money there rather than more curriculum training, I think makes far more sense. And when a school has a good, solid student assistance program, actually the children feel it. There's an atmosphere in the building that says the grown-ups here care about me. I am safe in identifying what's going on in my house. It is safe for me to ask for help. I always say that, you know, you have a good student assistance program when more referrals come from buddies or from the kids themselves than come from the adults.
Addiction. The greatest impact that addiction had on my family life and my kids was I wasn't able to be there for them. I was irresponsible. I smoked crack cocaine daily while carrying my 2 sons. Addiction took me many places. It never would allow me to truly be home raising my children.
My mom's addiction was hard on my brothers and sisters and myself. It was hard because I had to become the head of the household. I had to help with homework. I had to do laundry. I had to do chores, all while still trying to be a child myself and do my homework and spend time with my friends. Basically, my childhood was snatched away. Now that my mom's clean, we can just be brothers and sisters. We can hang out, do brother and sister stuff. I mean, my mom's home now. We can be a family. We always are a family now, doing family things together.
I believe kids need a healthy start in life, and I believe most of their behaviors are learned behaviors, and we need to be positive role models for our kids.
Children need a safe haven to come home to when they've been out in the world and maybe they're down or they've been disappointed. Where can you come to get filled up with love and comfort if it's not at home? And if it's drugs in your house, you don't really stand a chance of getting the love and the comfort and the attention and the cherishment that a child needs. They need that. They need to feel a part of a family first before they can feel part of a society. And they get that from home. Everything starts at home.
Sis, you were talking about some of the consequences earlier, consequences to the child, about their lack of trust, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk about some other consequences, some other social consequences as a result of having lived with an alcohol or drug-addicted parent?
Yes, the child who lives with an alcohol or drug-addicted parent who doesn't have meaningful adults intervening in his or her life growing up and providing that structure and that safety that we talked about is a child who's going to be more likely to suffer economic consequences. For example, if the father is the breadwinner, the primary breadwinner in the family, and is also alcoholic, the child is going to be more likely to have a dad who divorces his mom. He's going to be more likely to have a dad who is wasting the family money away, and so therefore the resources to the family are less. He's going to be more likely to have a dad who loses his job, and so the embarrassment and the shame and the fear that grows out of just living with addiction is simply compounded as these go on. Now, if that's my situation growing up, then I'm going to be more likely to have a lower level of education. I'm going to be more likely to have to help support the family. I'm going to be less likely to make as much money as my peers. And so the economic consequences aren't immediate. They are often more profound as life goes on. Then the consequences to my relationships as a child, and then my relationships when I get married. The impact of growing up in this kind of a family affects my capacity to have intimate relationships. That affects the marriage in the next generation. And when we talk about this being multi-generational, it is economically, it is emotionally, it is in the whole, all the fabric that keeps our society strong gets eroded when I'm a child of an alcoholic in that environment.
Don, how does that manifest itself in Indian country?
I would say it's similar. It's a domino effect. It's just like if you have a person who's an alcoholic, then it dominoes. It touches everything. You know, we look at it as being, interconnected, and I think we see that probably to greater degrees in terms of things that are more close. As our communities are close knit, and so it isn't like a family across town. What happens there happens to you, and so you'll see that impact is there very, very strong. And so we made this journey across the United States with this hoop, and we happened to have the opportunity to interview a lot of elders. We have videotapes of like 40 young people that have never went into alcohol and drugs, and we asked them, how do you do that? How is it you do that? And then the thing that's in common to every one of them is they're tied to the culture, or grandma, or the sweat lodge, or the Sundance. Everyone, how they maintain that resiliency, that thing that guides them to do it when all the odds are against them doing it. It's that spiritual side. It's that spiritual component. That was our strength in the past, and how we talk about it is in terms of teachings, and the teachings are still there, and we find that the ones that touch the teachings, they live their lives differently, and they have repercussions. They're the ones that are going to school, and they're the ones that are the safe drivers, they're designated drivers, etc. They're just assumed to be, and they're not made fun of or put down. They're very, very strong. So for us, it's bringing that culture to treatment. It's bringing that culture to recovery. It's bringing that culture component with it, and it's not like testing a model with some tribe in the East and then saying, okay, that model will fit everywhere. It doesn't, because each tribe has different teachings and different, so there has to be a flexibility in the model to allow the teachings of each community to arise and guide us on this path.
Steve, I know you're testing some models, behavioral models to deal with the welfare reform system. Anything that you can add to what's already been said?
I'm thinking of several. One is that you target the treatment modality to in this case, the women and the children, because there is a difference in terms of gender, in terms of going to treatment, doing well in treatment, and living afterwards. I think the other piece is, how do you have people who are in recovery be involved in the process? Because far too often people, especially in the child welfare system, they're finished, they've addressed their issues, they've not necessarily healed, but they've certainly repaired the presenting problems. They go live their lives, and it's hard to live drug-free if you don't have any other learning beyond the symptoms. So we're trying to get people who have a history, people who've already solved their recovery issues, like you were talking earlier, Donna, and to have them actually coach them about how it is to live drug-free in that particular neighborhood. Because as Don was saying, it's different in Brooklyn than Peoria than in Spokane. So you need, it's not like you can have a professional just say, do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need people in the community. That's what I was talking earlier about belonging. But I think another consequence, to build on Sis's issue about the economics, CASA, the Center for Addiction and Substance Abuse up in Columbia, did a study last year of all of state spending, because and they found that throughout, they contacted every state legislature, the budget office, and found out how they spent their money. 13% of all state dollars across the country, $84 billion, was spent on the issue of AOD consequences. When they looked at what the money was spent on, however, 96 cents of every dollar was spent on what they called shoveling up the wreckage: healthcare costs, child welfare costs, juvenile justice costs, medical costs, lost economic opportunities, and only 4 cents of those dollars was spent on either prevention or treatment. That's one of the consequences, because we tend to look at just the problem when it's in our face and don't appreciate that we have a real moral responsibility to help each of ourselves live a developmentally appropriate and have the opportunities to do what we can in this world.
Donna, one of those costs is really that the children oftentimes live in a very violent home. Any insights that you can provide for us on how we can best deal with the violence, how the children can best cope with that?
Well, this is not something people can do by themselves very easily. It has been spoken of among my 3 colleagues here that you have to have support. You really do. There has to be understanding, and there has to be support. There is a tremendous amount of fear that underlies what the acting out behavior is. Anxieties, anger, all comes from that fear of not being loved, not being appreciated, not being understood to be a human being. And it's how do I cope with it? And actually the acting out is very normal behavior for abnormal conditions and situations to live in. So wherever you see this type of violent behavior, it's really interesting, but you can tell sometimes from the family pet how sick a family is. You can find neurotic dogs. I have found this to happen. And after people have been through treatment and done some therapy and work, how much better the dog fares. It seems like it's happier, it's healthier.
Gets more attention, certainly.
That's part of it. But it's funny. It's amazing to me, though, the seriousness of this as to how far-reaching it is. The acting out, that anger, is a screaming out of help me, please. And if you see it, like you said, it's almost a moral imperative to try and get them to the right places to get help. And through some really good counseling and therapy and the support groups, a lot of people make it. They really do.
We've talked about the school systems helping. We've talked about some of the faith community issues that also come forward to provide support. Any other systems that we can think about that are providing some support for these families?
Well, we know that treatment works, and I think one of the things that I'm finding is a real willingness of the AOD world, all the providers now, to do more than just, well, I run my treatment program, send me the people that are ill, I'll send them back well. That they're seeing themselves much more responsible to raise the dialogue about how to educate, so that when they work with a mom who's done, well, they're going to work with the grandma or the aunt who's been involved with the child care and raising the child about, well, this is what's going to happen. This is what you can expect. Here's her differences now. Here's what she's planned to do in terms of relapse prevention and safety, so that they become more involved, because it really is a community issue.
We mentioned an awful lot the whole issue of isolation. Don, in your view, what is creating that isolation? How can we break that isolation the child feels?
Well, I think it's connected to, if you take a whole system, say a Native community that's been off track in that manner, then you really have, in a sense, an addictive organization. So now you have a child growing up in a system it doesn't feel safe, there's nowhere to go. And so what you do, they say a lot of times about Native people, they don't talk, they don't trust, they don't feel. And so it looks like, it's a stigma. You're quiet, you don't say anything. But there's a lot more to most of the Native communities, individuals, when they get into it. It's really a trauma. And there's that part about the secrets, the family secrets in the community. And those are powerful. I remember my mother could do that with a look. Just a look. I knew if I violated the secret. And it was paralyzing, almost in that. And of course, entire community may be, doing that. I think even the isolation by its design of the Native cultures, in many other cultures of people of color, there's a stigma both inside the community as to what that is, because it's survival. And I think that's a part of the isolation, because if you don't stick together, you're not going to make it. I think that's all a part of it. And I think the other part of it in the Native communities that keeps us in the isolation sense is we don't have that access to the technology and the information like you think that we might do, and so you don't know what to do, so it furthers paralysis. The things around, like, one of the most needed things we could get in Native communities is to get Al-Anon presence in there, because we know that when Al-Anons get present, they get healthy, they grab the children, people start coming to recovery, but people are afraid to go in there, or it's not as strong as it could be, and we really need it to be strong. And I think a part of that is just that fear of coming to a Native community. Looking at our earth suits, our outside, realizing there's some things we have in common. We love our children like you love your children. It's about loving these children. It's about getting them to start to see what recovery looks like, and if there's a movement and people are going down there, that breaks the isolation. When you start to see that switch in energy and in numbers and in people that you saw one way, all of a sudden changing, that is creating hope. Hopeless creates isolation. Hope creates the breaking of it.
Absolutely. Sis, that whole notion of embracing children, what does that mean to you?
It's interesting that we were speaking earlier. I think that in a just and civilized society, that every single adult has a measure of responsibility for every single child. And in the last couple of generations, we've pulled somewhat away from that in our greater society. And so for children who are isolated in these addicted family systems, it is far more difficult to feel like they belong to anything that is safe. So therefore, what's the role of these people outside the family? And that is, I think, first of all, to break the silence. If the children don't have the power to do that, then the adults outside the family have an absolute obligation to do that. So if a child goes into a health clinic, the school nurse, into a doctor's office for a regular checkup or because of a bee sting or for whatever, one of the automatic questions ought to be, you know, do you wear your seatbelt? Anybody in your family drink too much or use drugs you're worried about? It should be right in there with the questions that get asked that have to do with personal safety and physical health. And that helps children to reframe their reality, to see it in a larger context. And so if it happens there and it happens in the next place, we are beginning to break that silence.
What other things can we do? What other things can other systems do in terms of assisting these children?
I think in the Native communities, I would say the thing that's missing the most that could really, really assist, accelerate, is to make culturally appropriate material. And to get that in the school systems. And how do you get that? Is to get the people involved. You know, it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago in the Native communities, if you were sober 30 days and you could say counselor, not stutter, they'd make you one, you know, whatever level you wanted, because that's all we had. But we have thousands of us sober now, you know, in our communities, and are willing to make that commitment to do this work. And that many of the information, like Sis's organization has, that we can take and add a cultural component to it, and it will take off because it fits. It's something that's familiar. It fits thought. It fits culture. It fits teachings. You know, and there's like a untouched army in our communities that could really help to accelerate and get it, and want to get involved in it. It's not that you know, it's like part of the 12-step work. You have to give it away to keep it. And I think we have an army, an untouched army out there, except the materials, you know, are not there. And to be able to get it there, you know, the technology, things like we're talking about here, they don't even know it exists in a lot of cases, to figure out how to get some of that information, you know, out there.
Information, Sis, speaking of that, you recently are about to publish a new set of materials for children of addicts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it is close to production. We've been developing it actually for the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, a kit for children it's called, and it will literally be a box that will have videos that can be used in programs for children. It has comprehensive activities, and start to finish, it is a children's program that can be used for children of clients in treatment in the treatment center, with very minor adaptations, could be used in student assistance programs in school. Something very similar to that was used in a number of the churches in the city in Detroit recently. It can be used in church settings, and it certainly could be adapted by Indian people for use in their culture, and it provides activities that are fun, that cause children to want to come back and do it again. So it is an inviting program. It's not painful. It's not I'm afraid to go to therapy. It is a program that helps children get all the things we've been talking about. Get that clarity, break the rules, learn how to access safe people, understand it's not their fault. Those kinds of messages that will come in that program are the kind that need to be in every program that's designed for these children to help change the trajectory of their lives.
Very good. Steve?
Well, I think there's, when you think about substance abuse and alcoholism as a disease, you realize that for someone to stop that, as Dawn was talking about, you know, there's thousands of, those are heroes. They've gone over and above something that other people were not able to do. So I think Recovery Month is a perfect way to start celebrating the people that have succeeded. And I think the real issue is for all the organizations to begin to think about how do we weave that back into our day-to-day operations. Because what's the sense of having somebody heal and leave our system, and then we're just left with what Dawn talked about, those addicted organizations, places where we're not necessarily working to have healthy staff as well as the people we serve. I think the other piece is to realize that our real goal is not just to have drug-free people, but to have healthy people. Because when we're healthy, that's even beyond that. And I think that's where the issue becomes, how do we start to look at the issue of not only taking care of symptoms, but starting to heal people, and to heal the cultures and the populations that we have that have for many years and many generations, unfortunately, had lots of historical trauma that gets played out in the usage of day-to-day life.
Donna, Recovery Month, what does that mean to you, and how do you think that it can be used?
Well, for myself, I would really like to see more professionals from all walks attend more of the Al-Anon meetings, the open meetings, as well as AA, as well as Alateen, and so that they know from where they're coming when they advise others to attend. I will definitely say that I had no idea when I went through my own training how pervasive this disease was going to be and how large a group, a population would be in my own practice of adult children of alcoholics in particular. And with an understanding of just from theory, from doing some case studies, it's very different from your everyday, clientele that have been somehow or other, like 1 in 4 children, have been affected by alcoholism to some degree in some aspect of their lives. To have a working knowledge, it helps professionals to do their work a lot better. And I've certainly seen the recovery rate among clients that attend both their 12-step meetings and do their private one-on-one counseling is much quicker and sounder. So I would recommend professionals to get out there and do a survey and allow themselves to have the experience.
We have about 1 minute each for you to give a message to that child who's living with the parent. What would you say to them?
I would say that there is a movement going on in our community. It is healing. It's spreading. Recovery Month, and I think thanks to CSAT, we were allowed to create this movement, this sobriety movement. The first year we mailed like 6 packages. Last year we had 27 tribes signed up, and now we'll double or triple that. And I would tell them all the prophecies, all those things are true, and that it is happening. There's a awakening, there's a healing going on, and if they haven't seen their community, to just wait, because it is coming. It's just spreading like wildfire. And so mine would be the message of hope, that the turnaround is taking place.
Donna.
To any child out there, you don't have to live like this. You really don't have to live like this.
I would say that you are beautiful and special, and what has happened to your family and to you is not your fault, and that there are safe people that can help you and love you and support you no matter what happens to your parents. And please find them and stay connected to them.
Very good. And Steve?
I would say dare to dream large and live in a way that matters to you and what you want for your life. We all start someplace, but we don't have to wind up there. And also there are lots of places to get information. I know we're going to talk about that towards the end. But the 2 that are on my mind right now would be freevibe.com, which has a whole set of materials for you. And certainly for those people who are involved with the child welfare system to check cwla.org. We have all sorts of information and other things to do, next steps. And last but not least, that this is America, and that you and your friends and the people in your community should advocate for the kind of resources that you want in your community and what you want from government. That's what we're here for.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
NIAAA, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, SAMHSA, and many other organizations at the federal level are partnering with the spouses of governors, and we now have 30 to 32 spouses on board who are trying to raise awareness of the impact that alcohol has on the 9 to 15-year-old child and the negative consequences that happen because of that alcohol use. For instance, the increased chance of a child becoming addicted to alcohol or another substance if they start drinking before the age of 15 is like 40%. So if we can reduce the number of children that get involved, we can do a lot to prevent the need for treatment. Research has shown clearly that parents are one of the chief influencers on a child's decision to use or not to use.
We hope you will take away something of great value from this program, but more importantly, we hope you will do something to help one of the millions of children who suffer in silence because of a parent's addiction. To learn more, visit www.cwla.org. samhsa.gov and click on the Recovery Month icon or call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. Thanks for watching.
National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month will be observed during September 2001. The month is set aside to highlight the effectiveness of drug and alcohol treatment and to reinforce the fact that recovery from addiction is possible. The free Recovery Month kit can help you play a part in raising awareness about the benefits of addiction treatment for your community. The kit offers ideas and suggestions for planning and implementing a manageable campaign that conveys this year's observance theme, We Recover Together, Family, Friends, and Community. To receive your free Recovery Month kit or other free publications and materials related to addiction treatment and prevention, visit the website of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at www.samhsa.gov or call 1-800-662-HELP.